Hey everyone, my name is Anelise. Welcome back to my channel. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather today, so excuse me. I have an important question on my mind that I want to discuss in today's video, and that question is, do women even need men anymore? Let's get into it. As always, I will predominantly be speaking from my own experience because that is what I know best. For starters, a little background on me. I grew up with divorced parents, and for that reason, it was hard to really have a positive relationship with my dad, and that of course bled out into the other men in my life as well. So I came into adulthood, 18, 19, 20 years old, not really respecting men, not really interested in men other than getting their attention and validation, and not really thinking that they had anything. The best way I could describe my view of men is that they were like big, hairy, stupid babies, right? And I think a lot of women feel this way, and it definitely makes sense when you think about some of the experiences that women have had with men. When I think about my own experience, it does not surprise me that I felt the way that I did. Yet I continued to find myself kind of trapped in this cycle of wanting a man to take care of me, wanting to have a man's approval, and wanting, honestly, isn't even a strong enough word to describe the way I felt. I felt like I needed it. I felt like I couldn't exist unless I had a man's approval and acceptance and appreciation. And this led me down a lot of weird paths, things that I regret, things that I don't, funny stories, interesting ones, sad ones. But at the end of the day, I didn't respect men. I thought they were big, stupid, hairy babies. So even when I was dating a man or in a relationship with a man or hooking up with a man, it always got to a point where it was just like, I can't do this anymore, we're done. That is until I met the man who is now my husband. So as I mentioned, I found myself kind of on this hamster wheel of seeking male approval. And it just so happens that I met my now husband in the same month that I broke up with my most recent long-term partner. It was over 2 years that we dated. We had lived together for, a summer. I don't know how many months. And I broke up with him. I moved back home. I was one state over. And I decided to get a job at the company my mom worked at because she would provide me an in, and it was actually a Christian nonprofit. So I had to sign a faith statement saying, I believe these bullet points of Christianity, and they can do that because they're a nonprofit. I don't know. But I was willing at that point. I hadn't been raised religious, baptized Catholic as a baby. I didn't go to church. I had started opening the Bible here and there a little more out of curiosity because I was very open-minded and still am, and curious about ideas and world religions, and just very spiritual. I always felt that there was a higher power. I always felt connected to the rest of life, and I always really wrestled with those existential questions like, why are we here? What is the point of all of this? So it wasn't the biggest leap for me to sign the faith statement and start working at that organization. And it just so happens that my husband was also working there, and that is how we met. I had spent a couple seasons up in a ski resort town working at the ski lifts, and he overheard me chatting with one of our coworkers about it, and that piqued his interest. So he struck up a conversation with me, asked me to coffee. Wasn't interested. I told him I would go, but let's keep it strictly platonic. Lucky for him and for me, he did not know what that word meant. So we went to coffee, and I found him very interesting. He was in that in-between stage of like, you're definitely not a boy anymore, but you're also not quite a man. But he was very sincere and very honest and open and earnest, just candid about the fact that he was looking for a wife. That's what he was doing. That's why he was here. And that was so refreshing to me, because I came from the land of like situationships and hookups and having like a nebulous like container or an open relationship, or just like keeping things really undefined, kind of like a free love type of thing, in the sense that he was clear with his intentions, and in the sense that he was consistent. What he said he believed, what he professed to be looking for, who he claimed to be, all of those things that he was verbally telling me were lining up with absolute precision to who he actually was and how he behaved and the actions that he took. And I found this out gradually over time. You know, I had a good feeling about him after our first meeting, after getting coffee. So I continued to spend some time with him. It didn't take me long to realize just how consistent he really was. And it only took me a little bit longer to realize just how badly I had been craving that in my life. You know, I see a lot of women online talking about how we can make our own money as women, and, you know, you can have a designer baby, you can outsource childcare, you can outsource food, you can outsource basically everything and have a career and have kids if that's what you want, and have someone to keep your house clean. We have it all, I hear women say. What do we need men for? I also hear a lot of sentiments just in the world at large about how women shouldn't be dependent on men, and it's unsafe to do so, and it is much smarter to fend for yourself, and that a relationship is not a need but a want. And I get that. I see that perspective, and in some ways I agree, but in other ways I do not. When I think about human beings from a historical perspective, starting with present day and working all the way back to, I don't even know, whenever the first human lived. Not an expert, not an archaeologist, also definitely wasn't there. But purely on a physical, biological level, men are bigger and stronger than women are, and they are hormonally composed very differently. Again, not an expert on this. My understanding, men, testosterone, that sums it up, you know? Women, on the other hand, we have our complicated 28-day cycle of testosterone and estrogen and progesterone, and maybe I'm even missing some. It is very obvious that men and women are different, and that difference, I think, has been, historically speaking, very advantageous, and there's a reason why men and women pair up together and raise families, not only because that is what is biologically required to create human life, a man and a woman, right? Or, you know, a sperm and an egg if we're gonna really sterilize the process. But this difference, I have come to realize, runs so much deeper than just a physical difference. And the difference in hormones that men and women have also very intimately influences the structure of our minds and the way that our minds work and the way that our minds think. So a simple example of this is that testosterone raises aggression in a person. Another thing would be that women, by and large, because of our hormonal differences, tend to be more nurturing and more communicative, and all of the things that basically lend themselves very well to raising children. Because biologically speaking, our bodies are designed to do that, our minds are designed to do that as well. Now, back to my own experience, the safety and nervous system regulation that I felt, specifically in the presence of my husband, was not something that I had felt very much before in my life. You know, having a divorce in the family just is very destabilizing. And this is to say nothing ill of my parents. They did a wonderful job raising me. They put so much intention and effort into it. But divorce is inherently destabilizing because as a child, my worldview was really dictated by my family. And when that family unit was fractured, so was my worldview. So I found myself, for the first time in my life, in the presence of a good man that I knew that I could trust, who was willing to prove that to me slowly over time, without trying to force my hand in any way or manipulate the situation or get what he wanted out of me. He was on a good faith search for his wife. You know, he wasn't looking for someone to fill a void or give him physical pleasure or anything. So our connection was very open-ended. It was mutually trying to figure out if we were a fit for each other. And it was through that process, because I wasn't putting on any pretenses. Like I said, I had just broken up with somebody. I wasn't looking for male validation in that season of my life. In fact, I was very adamantly against it. I was tired of doing the same thing over and over again, getting the same results, dating lame guys because they gave me attention and I thought that I couldn't get any better than that. So my husband and I started on this beautifully even footing where I knew exactly what he wanted and who he was, and I did not know what I wanted, but I was very open with him. And as I discovered what I wanted, I continued to be open with him, and I was open with him about who I am the whole entire time. So we started dating, and as time went on, I just began and still continue to reach deeper and deeper levels of safety and peace in my psyche, in my nervous system. Like, I can't even describe to you how different I feel, how grounded I feel. And part of it is just having someone there who genuinely wants to be there. But another huge part of it that I don't think should be understated is the fact that he is a man. So many of us, I found in my own experience that I was completely inundated with narratives about men that were just negative and not constructive and were very divisive. But what I learned from my husband that kind of led me to understand men at large is that men at their best are like a deep well of presence and peace and stillness. I, as a woman, tend to feel a lot more movement within me, mentally, physically, which can be expressed as anxiety at times, or excitement, or flirtation, or conversation. But there are always different things going on. There are always so many plates that I'm spinning, and right now I also work in childcare, don't have any kids of my own yet, but I see how this like framework that women tend to operate from really lends itself to raising children, because there's always something new going on, and if you have more than one kid, someone's always getting into trouble. So you need to really have that flexibility and elasticity to be able to flip back and forth from one thing to another and make sure that everything gets done. On the other hand, when we think about men's work, traditionally, historically, men's work, the main thing that comes to mind is hunting or building something. But like, let's take hunting. Hunting requires a deep, deep well of focus and stillness and concentration, and it doesn't require a lot of words. Same thing with building or fixing something. It doesn't require words. You have to look at the problem, use all of your senses to assess the situation, and then respond in a very physical way. And understanding that about men has allowed me to have such a more beautiful appreciation for them. So some examples of this are like when I want to know something pertaining to my husband's inner world, his emotional world, I take the time to be very clear within my own self what my actual question is. Once I have found my question and distilled it, I ask it, and then I totally zip my lips. And what I have found is that my husband will take a lot longer than I want him to answer. A lot longer. Way longer. In the past, what I would have done is ask a question, not immediately get a response within the first 5 seconds, so clarify, or ask a second question, or just make some sort of comment to fill that silence, because it feels like he's not listening or participating in the conversation. What's actually happening is he's going deep into his inner world to kind of dredge up the answer to the question that I'm asking, because before I asked the question, he was focused on something else. And that male single track mind does not change gears lightly. It doesn't flip back and forth the way the feminine mind does. So I'm asking him to completely cease whatever it is he's currently thinking about, open up something very intimate like his emotional world, and then give me the full story. So yes, it takes longer than I want, but what's also fascinating is that if I am silent, completely silent, and I do not interrupt his process, I will get the answer. And there may be another pause, and then there will be more information. And pause and information, repeat until he has said everything, until he has given his complete answer to the question. And then almost every single time he will say something like, and that's it. That's all there is. Letting me know that he has now completed the answer to my question. I'll just briefly mention here that there are absolutely answers to the question, do men even need women anymore? And that's an interesting conversation all its own. I'm not really addressing it in this video. If you would like to see that, feel free to leave a comment down below. But we are talking about women needing men. Like I said, I've come across this notion that it is somehow wrong to need men or less than to need men. But I would argue the complete opposite, if that wasn't already obvious, that men and women are better together. We have complementary strengths that pad out our complementary weaknesses, and we can be impervious to so much more, susceptible to so much less, more successful when we work together in harmony. Men and women can simply do far more together than they can apart. And it is for that reason that I believe that men and women do need each other. And when it comes to the necessity of men in women's lives, this goes so much deeper than just breadwinning, than just making money. I don't even want to touch on that. Honestly, the whole trad wife discourse that exists online to me is completely fallacious. Like, it's just not even real. But at the same time, I understand, right? Because marriage used to be, in a certain sense, a property exchange. And marrying a good man when you could not make your own money was the way to remain secure and to have a good life. Now that we women can make our own money and do all of the things that we used to need a man for, vote, all the things, I can understand why people might think, okay, what do we need men for? But I want to emphasize that what men provide is not just like the logistical security in life. It is a deep primal need that we have for each other. And the best way that I could describe this comes from my religion. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I met my husband working for a Christian organization. When we started dating, I also started going to church with him. Now, the reason for this is very simple. I hope it doesn't get twisted in any sort of way. Of course, I'm opening myself up for that just by making this video. That's fine, I can deal. But my reasoning for going to church with my husband when we were dating was very simple. He was the best man I had ever met. I felt safe and at peace with him in a way that I had never felt before in my life, at least not for a very long time. Therefore, I was gonna go where he was gonna go. I was gonna do what he was doing. And that was a very conscious decision on my part, informed by all of my life experience, including my parents' divorce, including every single guy I had dated beforehand who was honestly kind of a bum, whose words and actions did not match, who said they wanted something and then didn't do anything about it. I was meeting for the first time and getting to know and dating a guy whose words and actions aligned. If he was going to church, I was going to go with him. I have a whole video going more in depth about this faith journey. You can find that on my YouTube channel. Feel free to check it out. As time went on, we started delving into Orthodox Christianity together. We were previously going to the Protestant church that my husband had been raised in his whole life. And the Orthodox Church is a totally different beast. I was the one who brought it to him, not to try to force his hand. And because I know how much he values my opinion, I decided to share that interest with him, and he was willing and open. So we started going to the Orthodox Church together. We're being baptized this July, actually, so all of this is pretty recent. And leading up to our baptism, we have been attending a catechism class. What this class entails is more or less a baseline knowledge of the faith, what we believe, why we believe it, where it comes from, the history, all of that. So for those of you who are totally unfamiliar, the Orthodox Church is the church that was founded by the apostles of Jesus Christ, and it maintains those traditions that were formed in that time, that were passed on in the Bible and verbally by Jesus himself, that those traditions have been preserved faithfully since that time, and the church has remained consistent in that even through various changes. It's extremely common. Orthodox Christianity is extremely common in Slavic countries. There are countries in Africa, and then Greece is also like a big one you might know, like the Greek Orthodox or the Russian Orthodox. But in this class that we are taking, we of course discussed Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, why God created humanity, men and women, and what happened in the fall. Before I go any further, please know that I am not an authority on this by any means. I'm sharing this solely to help you understand what my thought process has been on this question that we are asking in this video, and how what I have learned in catechism has helped me to sufficiently answer this question in a way that brings me peace of mind. Because again, I wrestle with existential questions a lot, and maybe you could even call it existential depression. This church has helped me find the most sufficient answers that I have found thus far, and I have done extensive searching. That being said, if you are interested in learning about the Orthodox Church in a more formal way, please contact your local priest and form a human-to-human connection with them and ask them any questions that you might have. In the same vein, if you're not interested, totally fine. Just hear me out, I guess. So in the creation story of the Bible, there are just a few relevant details that I want to discuss for the purpose of this video. Number one, Adam and Eve were created and told to be fruitful and multiply. In that sense, the man-woman relationship and bond is for the purpose of life. And I've had a lot of different views on life in my existentially depressed and angst-fraught adolescence and early adulthood. But where I land now is that there is nothing more important than life. The second thing I want to mention is that Eve was created out of Adam's rib. She was created to be a helper for Adam and created out of his rib, and I find that very noteworthy, because I don't think that men and women are meant to be separate. I firmly believe that they're better together, that a husband, a wife, and children is the most functional grouping of people. A husband and wife are the first building blocks in a family, and a family or families are the first building blocks in community. So I see the male-female relationship as entirely essential and more beautiful than it's given credit for. And I do want to also touch on this. Why possibly would this foundation of family, of community, this beautiful bond that we are created for, why would it be crapped on so much? And the answer that comes straight to my mind is division. You think about this with racial divides. I was just watching an interesting video earlier today talking about, was it Bacon's Rebellion or something in colonial Virginia, where white indentured servants and black enslaved and free people and just like the poor working class rebelled against the wealthy class extremely effectively, to the point where the wealthy class made it a point to legally sow division, make black and white people think that they did not need each other, and in fact that they should hate each other and stay away from each other and divide from one another. All of that was contrived to make sure that they never collaborated to rebel against this elite class again. And I think that a similar phenomenon is happening when it comes to the denigration of male-female relationships. There are so many lenses through which to look at this, and there are so many facets to it as well. So perhaps this will be a topic of further discussion on my channel. But essentially, I believe that men and women are exceedingly, unimaginably more powerful together, that they were created to be in unity with each other, and that the division between them is intentional to kind of disguise their power and to distract them from their power and to keep them weak and keep everybody in line. And you know, of course, I can't name like a specific group of people or person who is enacting this intentionally. Call it spiritual warfare, call it whatever you would like. The point is that it's happening. Just to close this, I will speak from my own experience again. It's really fascinating to be with my husband. We've been together not even 3 years yet, married for less than 1. As they say, when you know, you just know. But I have spent so much time unlearning that division, unlearning that sense of scorn towards the opposite sex, unlearning these preconceived notions. And it is an unlearning, and in this unlearning, I have come to remember so much about my childhood. And I have come to remember how much I wanted to be in love, how much I wanted to find my person, how much I wanted to be on somebody's team, be a part of a collaboration, work towards something greater with somebody that I love. I've always wanted that. I always have. And I felt so unsafe to want that, especially with how things in my parents' divorce shook out over my childhood and as adolescence, that I did not allow myself to want those things that I so deeply wanted as a kid. And you can, you know, debate whether that is nature or nurture, what have you. I will just reiterate once again, I was not raised religious. Of course, there is a vague religiosity to being American. It has the trappings of a Christian nation, and I think it was kind of founded in that way, but regardless, I was not inundated with any specific belief system any more than any other average secular kid is inundated with those things. And again, with the whole trad wife conversation, I feel like it's such, I don't know if misnomer is the right word, it's the one that's popping into my mind, but I feel like it's such a misnomer because anyone who is professing to be a trad wife online, trad wife, and let's just say the definition of a trad wife is a stay-at-home wife and mother who does not work. Anyone who is professing to do that online is not really true because they're posting online. You know what I mean? Like, I guess it could be considered a hobby, but I'm also thinking about like this idea that people on the opposite side have, that these women are putting their lives in the hands of men, putting themselves at risk, making themselves extremely vulnerable, not making their own money. But the thing is, even if you're not making your own money, you could still have a skill set that you could use to make money should something happen. And I think any woman who is posting about being a trad wife online obviously has a skill set that could be used to make money should something happen, and is therefore not in the mortal danger that some people might profess them to be. Anyways, I hope this video was cohesive, interesting, informative, thought-provoking, and I also hope it helps if you are in need of that. Thank you so much for listening to me and hearing my story. I really appreciate you being here. If you made it this far, do make sure to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There is plenty more coming, you guys. I am so excited to be here discussing and sharing my real views with you. For anybody who cares to listen, leave a comment down below letting me know what you thought of this video, and I will see you in the next one.